What if I told you that the real tragedy isn't when someone drowns, but when everyone watches them slowly sinking for years and does absolutely nothing about it? Today, I'm going to share a story that will completely change how you see the people around you. This is the story of Paige Swanson and why nobody saved her. But here's the twist. This isn't really about Paige at all. We live in a world where we believe we're connected. Social media, community programs, school counsellors, family support systems. We tell ourselves that if someone is really in trouble, someone will notice. Someone will help. We believe that tragedies are sudden, unexpected events, a car accident, a medical emergency, something that happens in an instant. We believe that our institutions, schools, families, communities, are safety nets that catch people before they fall too far. And most importantly, we believe that if someone is drowning, literally or metaphorically, it's obvious. There are clear signs, calls for help, dramatic moments where intervention is needed. But what if everything we believe about how people fall through the cracks is completely wrong? The truth is that most people don't drown in a single moment of crisis. They drown slowly, over months or years, in plain sight of everyone who's supposed to care about them. Paige Swanson was drowning long before she ever stepped foot in that lake. And everyone around her, teachers, counsellors, neighbours, even family, they all saw her going under. They just didn't recognise what drowning actually looks like. Because here's what nobody tells you. Real drowning is quiet. It's invisible. It's a 7th grader wearing the same 3 outfits on rotation. It's $20 bills left on kitchen counters instead of conversations. It's guidance counsellor meetings that get scheduled but never followed up on. Let me tell you who Paige Swanson really was. She wasn't a troubled teen who made bad choices. She wasn't a statistic waiting to happen. She wasn't even a victim. In the traditional sense, Paige was a 15-year-old girl who had become a ghost in her own life. When her parents divorced, she didn't just lose a family structure. She lost her entire support system. Her mother moved to Phoenix and became a voice on the phone that called less and less frequently. Her father became a stranger who showed love through delivery pizza money. But here's what's important. Paige wasn't passive in her own story. She was actively trying to save herself. She found Marcus, Sarah, and Jake, other forgotten kids who understood what it felt like to be invisible. She was building her own family from the pieces society had left behind. Paige Swanson was a survivor who was never given anything worth surviving for. Let's look at the evidence of how this happens. First, the school system. Paige's grades dropped from B's to D's over the course of 2 years. Her teachers noticed. They attributed it to the divorce and moved on. The guidance counsellor scheduled meetings. Paige didn't show up. No one followed up. Here's what's insane. In a school of 800 students, Paige ate lunch alone every single day for 3 years. Not one teacher, administrator, or peer support program intervened. She had perfect attendance for truancy, if you know what I mean. She showed up to school every day, sat through every class, and graduated on time. To the system, she was functioning. She wasn't causing problems, so she wasn't a priority. But here's the thing about drowning. It doesn't always look like thrashing around and calling for help. Sometimes it looks like treading water until you're too exhausted to continue. Second piece of evidence, community blindness. Paige lived in a suburban neighbourhood where people prided themselves on knowing their neighbours. But nobody knew that a 15-year-old girl was essentially raising herself. Her father worked late every night. Neighbours saw him leave early and return late, but assumed it was just a hard-working single dad doing his best. They saw Paige walking to school alone, taking out the garbage, maintaining the yard, and they thought, what a responsible teenager. Nobody asked why a teenager was shopping for groceries alone at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Nobody wondered why the lights in her house were on all night. Nobody thought it was strange that she never had friends over. The community saw all the signs of neglect and interpreted them as signs of maturity. This is how we fail people. We see what we want to see, and we assume someone else is handling the things that make us uncomfortable. The third piece of evidence is the most painful, the family myth. After Jake's death, when authorities investigated, Paige's father was described as doing his best as a single parent. Her mother was maintaining contact from Arizona. But doing your best isn't always enough, and maintaining contact isn't the same as maintaining a relationship. Paige's father wasn't evil. He wasn't abusive. He was overwhelmed and emotionally unavailable, trying to process his own divorce while providing for his daughter. But good intentions don't fill the holes that neglect creates. Her mother wasn't heartless. She called every few weeks, sent birthday cards, even visited twice a year. But consistency in parenting isn't about grand gestures. It's about being there for the small moments, when a teenager needs to feel like they matter to someone. The myth is that families have to be obviously broken for kids to fall through the cracks. The truth is that families can look functional from the outside while being completely empty on the inside. From a psychological perspective, what happened to Paige is called ambiguous loss. She lost her family structure, but everyone involved was still alive and supposedly present. This type of loss is actually harder to process than clear-cut grief because there's no closure, no clear beginning or end to the trauma. Paige developed what psychologists call learned helplessness, but not in the way you might think. She didn't stop trying. She learned that her efforts to connect with traditional support systems were futile, so she stopped trying those specific things. Instead, she adapted. She found Marcus, Sarah, and Jake. She created her own support network from other kids who had been similarly abandoned by the systems meant to protect them. The night at the lake wasn't a suicide attempt, or even particularly reckless behavior for teenagers. It was a group of forgotten kids finally feeling like they belonged somewhere, trying to create the kind of memories that other kids take for granted. The tragedy isn't that teenagers were drinking at a lake. The tragedy is that this was the first time in years that Paige felt like part of a family. But here's the hidden theme that nobody wants to acknowledge. We're all complicit. This isn't just about Paige Swanson. This is about how our society has created systems that are designed to help people, but only if those people present their problems in very specific, recognizable ways. We have guidance counselors who schedule meetings, but don't follow up when kids don't show. We have teachers who notice changes in behavior, but assume someone else is handling it. We have neighbors who pride themselves on community involvement, but don't actually know the people living next door. We have parents who mistake providing for their children with actually being present for their children. And most importantly, we have a culture that celebrates independence and self-reliance to the point where asking for help is seen as weakness, and offering unsolicited help is seen as intrusion. Paige Swanson fell through the cracks, not because there weren't enough safety nets, but because all of our safety nets have holes designed to catch only certain types of falling. 5 years after Jake died, Paige drove back to Crescent Lake. The dock had been repaired. Warning signs were everywhere. There was a memorial plaque about water safety. But as she stood there, watching the sunset paint the water gold, she realized something that broke my heart when I first heard this story. Nobody put up a memorial for all the ways Jake had been drowning before that night. Nobody put up warning signs about the kind of emotional neglect that leads teenagers to find family in all the wrong places. Nobody created safety measures for kids who are drowning in plain sight. Paige realized that night that she had been waiting her entire life for someone to save her. Teachers, counselors, neighbors, family. She had been sending out distress signals that everyone saw but nobody recognized. And in that moment, standing alone at the lake where her friend died, Paige made a decision that probably saved her life. She decided to stop waiting for someone else to throw her a rope. She decided to learn how to swim. Here's what Paige's story teaches us. First, drowning doesn't always look like drowning. The people who need help most are often the ones who have learned not to ask for it. Second, good intentions aren't enough. Scheduling meetings, attributing problems to life circumstances, and assuming someone else is handling things, these aren't help. They're ways of avoiding the uncomfortable work of actually seeing people. Third, family isn't just about DNA or legal guardianship. It's about showing up consistently, creating safety through presence, and making someone feel like they matter enough to be seen. But most importantly, if you're drowning right now, if you're listening to this and thinking about someone in your life who might be Paige Swanson, or if you are Paige Swanson, the story doesn't have to end with waiting for rescue. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is learn to swim. I want you to do something for me. Think about the people in your life. Really think about them. Not how they appear on social media, not how they present themselves, but how they actually are. Is there someone who's been treading water while you assumed they were swimming just fine? In the comments, I want you to tell me about a time when you felt invisible, or a time when you realized someone else was drowning in plain sight. We need to start recognizing what drowning actually looks like if we're ever going to get better at throwing people ropes before they need them. And if this story resonated with you, share it. Not for views or engagement, but because somewhere out there is another Paige Swanson who needs to know that someone sees them. Remember, we can't save everyone, but we can start by actually seeing them. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.